Thank you for joining us for the Stanford Medicine Corporate Partners Program special webcast presentation, Grief and Compassion. Stanford is grateful to all of our corporate partners for their philanthropic contribution toward the build-out of our new adult hospital and the expansion of the Children's Hospital. As part of that partnership, we are proud to bring these educational sessions to you and your family. I'm Mary Windishar, today's moderator, and our program comes to you from the Stanford University campus in Palo Alto, California. And now on to the presentation, Grief and Compassion. Discussing today's topic, we have Dr. Fred Luskin. Dr. Luskin has completed extensive research on forgiveness therapy. He is the author of the bestseller, Forgive for Good, a proven prescription for health and happiness, and Stress-Free for Good. He has trained lawyers, doctors, church leaders and congregations, hospital staffs, teachers, and other professionals to manage stress and enhance forgiveness. Dr. Luskin is the director of the Stanford University Forgiveness Project and an associate professor at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. He also serves as the co-chair of the Garden of Forgiveness Project at Ground Zero in Manhattan. Also joining us today is Dr. Mark Abramson. Dr. Abramson is the founder and facilitator of Mindfulness-Meditation Based stress reduction programs at Stanford Health Care and Stanford University School of Medicine. He conducted these classes several times a year for 12 years. He's also practiced dentistry in the Bay Area for more than 25 years, specializing in the treatment of chronic pain and temporomandibular disorders, focusing on non-drug-oriented care, integrating traditional dental approaches with mind-body techniques, osteopathic manual medicine, and acupuncture. He has been an instructor at the College of Osteopathic Medicine in Pomona since 1985 and has lectured throughout the country on TMJ orofacial pain. And he also leads retreats on mindfulness meditation. Welcome, Dr. Luskin. You are starting first, and then we'll have Dr. Abramson. Now, you don't have any slides today, right? Okay, no. Great.
Well, hi. I was asked to come in and talk for a little bit with Mark here about, this was a response to the shooting in Las Vegas. And, you ask any of us anything about that, and who could even comprehend somebody like going into a building, knocking out the windows, and then trying as hard as they could to kill as many people as they could. I mean, it's almost incomprehensible that human beings would do something like that. And I remember 15 years ago when I was asked questions like this around the attacks on 9/11, that who could imagine flying a plane into a building at 600 miles an hour just to kill people? And then also this week here in Northern California, we have fires, and even right outside of Stanford here, the air is dark and murky, and it's almost surreal to see how much destruction there can be, both by human beings and by nature. And I guess what we can do is a little bit talk maybe about how human beings throughout history have tried to adapt to a world that is destructive and can cause great harm, both in nature and in people. One of the challenges, and maybe the challenge of being a human being, is to recognize like how vulnerable we are. Like I think about this a lot because I've done forgiveness work in situations that are just horrendous. I remember one time here on this campus, sitting in a room of about 20 people, each of whom had an immediate family member of theirs killed in violence and political violence. And I was sitting in this room thinking, I don't even know what to say. I'm sitting there thinking that all these people had somebody killed, and for no reason. And then my mind went, and this isn't the only place in the world where this happens. And then, it expanded out. And what I was left with is this question of how do we make peace, and how do we recognize the strengths of being a human being when we are particularly vulnerable throughout our whole lives? It's a daunting challenge. And this vulnerability in some part reflects on our mortality, that we are all mortal. And sometimes that mortality shows itself in just horrific ways when people are murdered, or when storms come in, or earthquakes, or violence. And anyway, this is not a small question, and it's not just about one shooter, and it's not just about one fire. The question is, how do we live this life with hope and resilience? And things like this come along to remind us at some level how precarious this life can be. That things happen, and things happen that are awful. One of the antidotes, and again, there is no perfect antidote to the fear, the vulnerability, the anxiety that all human beings face, that is naturally triggered when terrible things happen. But one of the antidotes is always to remember, at the same time that we are vulnerable, we live in a world of almost astonishing beauty. And that even in the worst of that tragedy at Las Vegas, people were trying to help each other. You know, I was reading just today that the state of Nevada is very low on mental health services. Like, for their population, they don't have that many psychiatrists and psychologists. And it's a problem now with what happened in Las Vegas, and yet people are flocking in from all over to help. And so one of the things to realize in terms of just how we cope with this is we have minds and we have nervous systems that are designed to alert us to danger and to warn us that things are not safe, and to arouse us, to get us upset, to try to do something about that. So when information comes in that, like, horrible violence has occurred, or nature is, on the rampage in some way, and our vulnerability becomes aroused, that part of our brain, we're in danger, is going to take over our whole brain. And if we're not careful, that will happen, because threats are everywhere, and we're wired, deeply wired, to respond to threat. So one of the simplest antidotes is to just both remind ourselves and to look. For even in the midst of all tragedy, there's incredible goodness. You know, you can't think of a tragic experience in human nature where other human beings have not been miraculous. You know, I have a friend who, right after the attacks of 9/11, he was a minister right nearby. When almost everybody else in his immediate milieu fled New York City because they were terrified as the planes are hitting the World Trade Center, this man went into the building and started to help. And helped for about 10 months and set up places where people, the firefighters and stuff, could help. Like, this was the best of humanity. And one of the things we have to be careful of when we are frightened is not to lose sight of the goodness and beauty and kindness and generosity of human beings. And at the same time, it's a call, again, if we want to practice resilience and we want to practice coping, we ourselves are advised to practice acts of generosity in any way that we can. So for most of us, doing something makes us feel less afraid, makes us less tuned into our anxiety. So doing something can be, at the simplest, writing a check that sends money and supplies to people who have been hurt. Doing something can be, now here in Northern California with the fires, opening your home to somebody if you're in an area not affected by fires. Doing something can be making phone calls to comfort people. Doing something can be, driving up somewhere and helping. But there is something about human beings' capacity not just to give credit and watch other people's acts of generosity and goodness, but to practice them ourselves. And so it's natural when we see something, certainly like Las Vegas, where that cruelty and horror is almost unimagined. It's very easy for that to shut down the parts of our nervous system and brain that are hopeful and helpful. It takes some kinds of decision, but that decision affirms our power in the face of fear and horror. So two of the things that I would suggest to remember is, one, this has always been true for human beings on this earth. Always. There has never been a totally safe time or totally safe place for people to live. That's actually not our relationship to life. Second, we can do something about it. We can help, we can listen, we can provide comfort, we can remember the good. That's some of the external stuff. From the internal stuff, some of the ways that we can soothe ourselves, the first and always most important is talk to other people. So let's just say you're watching TV and you see either people burned out of their homes or, ducking for cover in Las Vegas. Suffering alone is probably not the worst thing, but one of the ways that human beings make almost everything more difficult. Thinking that you're alone in your pain, thinking that you're alone in your fear, thinking that you're alone in the sense of anxiety or what the heck is happening to this world or how have we all gone so crazy. Most people are thinking that. And almost everybody thinks that at different points about different things. One of the things that we can do to soothe ourselves is to share and to listen, to share discomfort, to share pain, to share fear, but also share strategies for handling it. Like, it's one thing to just say to somebody, boy, that was awful, how can any human being do that, blah, 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 blah. That's one kind of social support. Another kind of social support is to do all that and then offer to somebody, if this ever happens again or you need somebody to talk to, call me. Like, I'm here. Call me. I can be of help. Or, talking to you has really helped me through this. Thank you. I appreciate you reaching out. So there's that deepening of the interconnected web that we all share that is one of the strongest responses human beings can give to tragedy and difficulty, to actually affirm the bond. Another thing that we can do internally when we're frightened, and in fact is probably a good idea, is to reflect upon when human beings in particular have been warm and supportive and loving to us. Because if we watch TV or we smell the air here or we remember, horrors of this earth, which are plentiful, again, that part of our brain that is only oriented towards threat, danger, and problems will shoot all sorts of chemicals into us to make us focus on those threat, danger, and problems. One of the ways to, again, not make that part of our brain wrong, but to give us a little broader foundation with which to hold it, is just to reflect upon when in my life did people reach out to me? When were they kind? And you don't even have to think of when they were kind in terms of disasters, but do I live with someone who does my laundry? Do I live with somebody who helps me co-parent? Do I live with somebody, do I have people in my life when I'm in need I can call? You want to bring up that positiveness to create more of a sense of balance and more of a sense of reality for what this human experience is. Because this human experience is a mixture of good and bad. The good news is when they investigate most people's lives, they find out that the great percentage of experiences we have are benign or positive. That somewhere in the mid-90s and above, we're having decent experiences. The issue is not that there's not a percentage of experiences that are difficult, and some of them are unbelievably difficult, having done forgiveness work with people who have had just unimaginable horrors. But that we don't get stuck in only thinking about those and only reflecting about those. The other thing that I think, that I know is essential, is we have to do things that quiet ourselves down. Mark here is going to talk a little bit more about mindfulness. My point of view is that it's almost anything that we can do that can counteract the natural anxiety that we feel when we're confronted with threat. So one of the things that is helpful to people and has been shown to be remarkable is if you're going to talk to somebody or if you're going to worry, walk while you're doing it. Move. Get some blood circulating, get some oxygen into your system, move. Even just shaking your hands hard like this will lower some of the anxiety that you feel. Something else that works along that lines to get rid of anxiety is just to tighten all the muscles in your body and let them go. Like we're dealing with very primitive physiologic reactions that generally have antidotes. But the quality also that I believe is essential is to become comfortable at some level with our own ability to manage some of our feelings. And that is that's an essential part of, you take the big picture of humanity, and even from that point of view, regularly now people talk, and the New York Times reflects on this, that this is one of the safest times in world history to be a human being. There's fewer wars than ever. There's fewer genocides. Right now, the largest percentage of people ever in the history of the world has available food supplies. Back over 100 years ago, I don't remember exactly when, in the 1800s, only about 15% of people knew for sure where their next meal was coming from. That human beings have emerged and lived forever in unpredictability and fear. We happen to be, in generally speaking, a safer time. But all that being said, it is essential for us to be able to take our emotions, take our reactions, and minimize them or mitigate them. And the practice that I'm going to do, just for everybody's sake, and I've done this before, just to quiet a little bit and open our hearts to goodness. And then Mark's going to do a segment on mindfulness, which he teaches here in Stanford. So just as what I'd like everybody to do who's out there listening is just to, if you're working with something with your hands, just put everything down. If you're next to your computer, just, allow yourself to defocus a little bit. And just sit still for a moment. Just sit still. And in whatever way you can, relax the muscles in your body as much as you're comfortable with. Relax the muscles of your belly. And relax the muscles in your chest. And relax the muscles in your legs, in particular if you're against the chair. Just allow yourself, you're practicing being safe right where you are. So relax. And then take maybe 2 slow, deep breaths into and out of your abdomen, where when you inhale, your belly expands. this takes relaxation, but just allow your belly to relax and open when you inhale, and contract and close when you exhale. This is the simplest breathing practice. And then after 2 or 3 breaths like that, do everything in your power to bring an image of someone you absolutely adore to your mind's eye. Like, what you want to do is, in a world filled with lots of scary things, you want to be able to remember that you can always love. And so you want to bring an image to your mind of someone you absolutely adore. And the purpose is to whatever degree you're able, feel as you're sitting here how much you adore them. You want to try to feel it. You want to try to warm your heart up. You want to try to just bring a remembrance that even in a crazy world, you can center on love. And nothing can take that from us. And you just want to sit for a moment and just try to remember for yourself that love exists, goodness exists. This is also a world of incredible beauty and opportunity, which doesn't minimize the dangers at all, but it helps you hold them. And that, generally speaking, to get in touch with this is just 2 simple steps. Relax your body. Take a moment out, relax your body. Relax your belly enough so that you can breathe properly, which is to inhale and open so you welcome the air. And then bring all of your attention that you can to something for you that is good and loving and profoundly positive. And just relax into it. That's one way of handling life, which can be difficult. Mark, my friend Mark, will talk to you about his expertise, which is mindfulness practice, which is a long-standing tradition and development on a different way of handling life's difficulties and struggles.
Thank you, Fred. That's beautiful. So I want to start off sharing actually a very important experience in my life that got me into mindfulness and got me into all this. When I was 14 years old, I was walking home from a wrestling practice in Baltimore, where I was born, on a rainy afternoon, and I was on a sidewalk, and I should have been very safe. I was between streets. There was no reason to be alert to anything happening. And all of a sudden, I hear a roar and a crash, and I'm flying through the air, and I got hit by a car, a stolen car that was out of control, and crashed into 2 houses afterwards. And I didn't see the car before or after. I just heard the roar of the engine that was floored and then was flying. At that moment, my life was changed. I couldn't imagine doing the things I was doing the moment before. And for some reason, I had a sense that this was a big event and that I needed to experience it as deeply as I could. In particular, when I was in the hospital for 2.5 months, and when I got out and I was on the streets, the sound, what Fred was talking about, when we have an experience like the shootings or the shock of fires or things like that, that this information, this sense experience of that gets stored very deeply and very quickly into our brains. And so the only thing that I had, the only alarm signal, was the sound of a car engine. And so as I was walking the street, when I recovered with my friends and I hear a car, without any control, I would jump out of my skin. I would run back to the other side of the street while my friends crossed the street. And for some reason, I realized that I had a choice at that moment. I could beat myself up. I could try to control my mind, which was obviously not controllable. But I could also feel that there was a part of me, my mind inside, that we now know, the primal reflex, that was now wired that that sound meant that I could die, that I could be injured very seriously, and nothing was going to control that. But I did have a choice, and the choice was I could be hard on myself, beat myself up, or I could be kind. And so I would stop, and I would, from one part of myself to this other part, I would say, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know you're trying to save me. I know you don't want me to get hurt again, but notice at this moment, I'm okay. And then I crossed the street, and it would happen again, and every time it got a little softer. And one of the things, that's where I really learned mindfulness, which we define as non-judgmental awareness, moment-to-moment non-judgmental awareness. And one of the things that I realized from this, that is kind of my core teaching that I do here at Stanford, is that I teach people that imagine for the rest of your life that no matter what happens to you, no matter what might come up, like all these incidents that we're talking about, the one thing that you could count on is your own mind being kind to you. And I think that that's your birthright, that you don't have to do anything to earn that, to have any diploma to get it, or any quality or skill. It's your basic right as a human being to have your own mind being kind to you at all times. And this is what mindfulness gives us, is the opportunity to be connected to ourselves no matter what we're feeling, no matter what we're thinking. One of the difficulties in teaching people meditation, the first thing I try to get understanding about, is that it's not about stopping your thinking, your thoughts, or controlling them, but it's tuning in through the experience of our senses to be with ourselves as we are. So I call this the come as you are party. And so we're going to do a few exercises and then talk about some ways to incorporate this into your life. And as Fred was talking about, the importance of opening up and breathing down into your belly is very critical, because we have an inner body language. And if I breathe up here, I've actually released stress hormones. The signal inside my body was it's to be at alert. As breathing down, as Fred was describing, into your belly, that signals the relaxation response. So it's very important how you breathe. And we're going to do some very simple breathing exercises into our belly. So I'd like you to sit up wherever you are and just bring your awareness into your own body and begin to, we know that we've been breathing all the time, but what we want to do is we want to experience the breath. So I'm going to close my eyes and kind of practice with you. I want you to begin to feel breath coming in through your nostrils and coming into your body. And then breathing out and feeling the air being released through your body and through your nostrils. And just see if you can stay connected to the sensation of the air moving in and out of your body. You don't have to stop thinking. You can just let that fade to the background a little bit as you bring to the foreground the feeling of air moving in and out of your body, through your nostrils into your belly. Just allowing yourself to be connected to yourself. And as you're breathing, just letting your own kindness radiate on yourself. just as you are, claiming your birthright to be kind to yourself in this moment. And if you lose connection to yourself, or even a moment, the mind flies away into thoughts and plans, and that's natural. And just continually coming back to connect with your breath. Just as you are. And let yourself take 3 more breaths, just as you breathe out, counting. 1, 2, and 3. And just take a moment to notice how you feel in this moment. Even if you settle down a little teeny bit, just acknowledge that, because that's very important. It completes the circuit of experience to just recognize the impact that you can have on yourself for even a moment. So let's look at doing these type of practices during your day. I believe that we need mindfulness in our history of mankind more than ever, because we can run down a flight of stairs worrying about something or arguing with somebody in our own mind, because we can go on automatic pilot. We know those stairs are so set, and we don't have to think about them anymore. In the past, we were walking through forests where you had to watch every step and listen very carefully. So we need these formal practices to remember how to get connected to ourselves in this way. But let me give you a very simple practice that I highly recommend. We have the blessing of taking showers and being clean in the world, where Fred was talking 100 years ago. Our ancestors didn't have this. Being clean was a big problem in the world. And so what do we do typically? We turn the water on in this magic room that we call a shower, and we put our hand in to make sure it's not too cold, not scalding us. We get the Goldilocks temperature. And then we go into automatic pilot, and we start thinking and planning, oh God, I can't believe I got to do that today, and then, and we wash ourselves, and we're not connected at all anymore. We're in our heads. And then we get out of the shower, and we scrub ourselves off, still thinking and planning in our heads. What I ask you to do is to turn this into a spa treatment simply by going in the shower and staying with the wonderful feeling of the water. You have this beautiful soap that you're washing with, that your ancestors would have. Kings and queens didn't have the soap that you have. The shampoo with herbs and spices, and feeling yourself, washing your hair. And then as you're drying, you're connected and getting a massage that you're giving yourself. As you're combing your hair out, you feel the comb going through your hair. All you have to do is stop and really feel the experience that you already have. You already own it. And it turns your whole life around. So things like this, practices like this, where we don't take things for granted, we appreciate what we have. We do the practices that Fred was talking about to bring kindness to ourselves, to bring appreciation to those who are there for us in life that so deeply. And so thank you, and I hope this is helpful to you.
It is. Thank you so much. And also thanks to you, Dr. Luskin. And now we'll move on to the question and answer portion of our event. To participate in the Q&A, all you have to do is type your question into the Q&A window. And maybe I'll get us started before others come in. I don't even know who should answer this, but how do you notice that you're feeling stressed? Because the practices you just gave me, brought tears to my eyes, but I don't even know whether I notice that stress feeling. What causes us to notice something like that?
Well, that's why. So we do these practices to bring us more connected to our senses, because what we've found in our society, and particularly the way we live today, is that we're trapped in our thoughts all the time, okay? And we're inundated with 24-hour news cycles and all these things. So we need a time to put ourselves aside and tune in. And then as we stay connected to ourselves, we start to notice those feelings. And what mindfulness does is it allows us not to judge those feelings or try to control those feelings, but to let them flow. I mean, these are the natural full spectrum of human feelings that as we are holding them with the kindness that we're cultivating, we can be sad. You know, we can even be angry, but underneath that, we're holding that anger with this underlying kindness that lets it arise quickly and then pass away. So we don't get stuck there, or we don't ignore it in a way that it gets incorporated into our physiology, which creates a lot of health issues.
So we don't have to fix it. We just have to feel it.
We have to feel it and
Okay.
be with it.
I'm going to give a little different answer, which in no way disagrees with what Mark is saying. But I think in normal life, you would have to assume you're stressed to some degree. That hurry, multitasking, eating quickly, being busy, being at work and worrying about whether you're getting everything done or having demands on you, the normative is to feel some degree of stress. That doesn't mean that the stress, there's anything wrong with it, but it means that it's there. So practicing exactly as Mark says and building that into life both helps us manage it and become more aware for ourselves. But the other part of the answer to your question is we have more of our kindness, goodness, mindfulness, quiet. We have so much about that to discover about ourselves. So you don't want to look at this as just stress management. You want to look at it as learning and uncovering and developing somewhat dormant parts of yourself. So when Mark says, and we've taught together numerous times, when you say, I have this capacity in me to be kind, well, of course you do, but the more that's practiced and uncovered, the deeper and stronger that gets. I hope you see how that reframes the question just a tiny bit.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. People, let's get others involved with that. My daughter is suffering from survivor's guilt. How can I help her?
Well, just if we could guide each other to the experience. I mean, I'm not sure the particulars of the survivor's guilt, but let's say it was in that incident. We're not in charge of who survives and who doesn't. So it's kind of letting go of the personal responsibility and realizing that, I think of the Lord's Prayer, give me this day my daily bread. And this is the way, this is the experience that we have, that we can choose to grow through. And start to see this is that we don't know the long-term evolution of this experience, and that reorienting yourself, because that's really the power that we have through what Fred's talking about and through mindfulness, is this is just an orientation that she has at this moment, and that's not the orientation that will evolve over time. Maybe the first step is to allow herself to have that experience without trying to change it, and watch it evolve. And as it evolves, that there might be certain qualities that she starts to notice that she grows out of this. More compassion for other people, more understanding, more appreciation of the life she has. Maybe dedicating yourself to honor the people who didn't survive by living the life the best life that you can, and to grow through this experience.
And let me just like try to order what Mark said, because I've heard him say this many times. You start wherever you are. So whatever your experience is, that's where you start. And so that's where you start opening. So step one might be like, where am I? How can I be truthful? And how can I see my actual experience now? But the two things after that can be, thank you.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that that was the word younger you came up with, was thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Like, wow. I mean, and then thank you and why? Like what, again, I'm just trying to put into, linear thinking what Mark said, but thank you. And why? What can I learn? Who can I help? What can I do? Purpose. So the problem comes, as Mark says all the time, is when you're fighting what you're experiencing. So you're not staying kind and aware to it. So you can ask good questions like, thank you, and what do I need to learn?
Okay, yeah. Speaking of thank you, someone here is saying thanks to both of you for this wonderful information. You're both incredibly helpful. Is there some dialogue that either of you would recommend to say when we're talking to people who've lost their homes or loved ones in tragedies? What else can we say besides, I'm so sorry?
I mean, I've sat with people whose wounds and losses are unimaginable. The hardest that I ever sat with was people, particularly women, whose family members were murdered in the attacks of 9/11. And I remember being in a room with them and talking and just like, what do you say? But it's not, I don't think it's so important as what you say, but I think there's internal strategies that you can use that might help you find right things to say. So one of those internal strategies is to try to knock away the part of you that distances yourself from their pain. We suffer because we're all like thinking, thank God it's not me. I'm glad this didn't happen to me. I wouldn't know how to deal with it if it happened to me. And, it's somebody else's problem. That I believe becomes our problem in terms of lack of empathy and compassion. What you want to work on is having active empathy and compassion and recognizing at some level there by the grace of whatever go I, so that it's not just their problem, but our problem or the human problem. We ask those kind of questions when we're pushing everybody else's suffering away because we're not letting it touch us, so we have no idea how to respond because it's just outside of us, and we're trying to limit how much we feel. One of my suggestions is to try to work on yourself so that you're not so self-centered and open to not just the possibility, but the reality of deep human suffering.
Thank you very much. How about this one? Can you give an example of how to deal with an emotional event that occurs either anger or fright, and then getting back to center so you can actually deal with the problem?
Yeah. Well, I think that's where mindfulness comes in a lot, is that, again, we're going to be angry, we're going to get reactive, we're all going to lose it over and over and over again in life. And to not expect yourself to do that, I think, is unrealistic. So I couldn't teach that because I react and I get upset about things. But the thing is that we can always cultivate a place. What we teach is it's not what's arising on the surface, but it's how you hold it. So again, to me, the bottom line is finding peace, and that gives you the space to be kind. So techniques of settling yourself down to remember how to relax is very important on a lot of levels in our bodies. We hold tensions and we've forgotten how to relax in our body. We forget how to relax in our mind. And so when we get triggered about something, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. Can you walk yourself down, and to recognize their basic physiology is we will get triggered, boom, like that instantly. But it takes a little longer to settle yourself down. And this is where, to be patient with yourself and to, I call it walking yourself back down. And so as soon as you the first thing you've done is you've recognized that you've reacted, and that's a very important piece. And that's where the awareness can allow you to start bringing the technique into place to settle down again and to restore yourself. And every time you do that, you get stronger at that recovery.
And I just want to remind everybody, everybody sitting here, Mark knows this because but it's that question of patience, that there are times and really awful things happen when you actually create a new center for a while of turmoil and suffering. And that's normal and healthy.
Did you say create a new center of turmoil?
Well, if your world has been rocked, you're not going to go back to your old center very quickly. And so patience and kindness towards self are essential, because, that's the whole question of grieving, that at a minimum, real trauma, real tragedy, real loss, Mark's car accident, whatever it is, they require the brain. It takes quite a bit of time for it to reorganize and create homeostasis again. And so if you were really close to one of these tragedies, like to expect to wake up 4 days from now and be able to just go back to who you are is a silly expectation, and probably will create more suffering.
Interesting. Asking for help is probably something you'll recommend, and wanted to be sure to remind everybody that your employee assistance program can help you with that. Here's someone asking something about a specific treatment. Do you have any knowledge or experience with EMDR? So that's eye movement desensitization, right? Okay. So if I didn't say it right, please correct me. Eye movement, I know that part's right. And how would you say this can help along with practice of mindfulness and getting through grief? EMDR, what does that stand for?
I have been trained a bit in EMDR. It's you go like this and you process your memories. I would highly recommend it. In fact, it's part of what might be called now energy psychology. Nobody fully knows how it works, but there is data that and EFT do help people recover from things that talk therapy might not help with. The simple answer is, if one thing doesn't work, try something else.
What about asking for help, like of a psychologist or a professional? Is that getting yourself off the hook too easy?
Well, you're the psychologist.
What is the hook?
Well, I'm going to explain that, because I'm having these feelings like, yeah, but you're being too easy on yourself. You should not be so kind to yourself, because that is how you improve. And we were taught to do that. Right. So could you talk a little more about that?
Well, this I'd love to talk about, actually, because it comes up a lot in my Stanford students. And one of the interesting things is exactly what you're saying. These students are afraid to let go of being hard on themselves, because their concept is that they will become failures. And to them, the connotation there is, this is how I got here, this is how I've achieved what I've achieved, and if I stop beating myself up, then I'll just flounder and fail. And there's another pathway which I think is actually more powerful, and that is kindness, and that we do respond to kindness. And as we start to see that we can let go of this harshness that we have towards ourselves, and that we can start to be supportive to ourselves, that we will actually do better.
we're so used to thinking, and our cultures reinforce this, that we need adrenaline to motivate ourselves.
Right.
That if we're without adrenaline and discomfort, then we're just going to sit around and watch TV and eat bonbons and drooling over ourselves. And that misses the whole positive aspect of our development and our brain. So yes, we've all, and I believe a lot of this comes from that pretty famous dictum that human beings are the descendants of anxious apes. So like the chill apes, they're toast, right? But the anxious apes became us. And so we're so anxious, and our basic mechanism to this world is anxious, that we kind of feel that if we're not anxious, we're not doing anything. But all of these practices that we're talking about are designed to quiet the mind so you can learn from the part of you that isn't anxious.
Right. And now we have a lot of science, neuroscience behind this, that when we're in a peaceful physiology, when we let go of this anxiety and open up in peacefulness, that it actually opens up the higher centers of the brain. And being anxious very much limits your choices.
Right.
And creativity comes out of peacefulness. Athletic performance comes out of peacefulness. Our walking around in family relationships actually is enhanced by peacefulness. So we've got to see that this is a very powerful practice that is life-changing. And it makes sense when you really look at it, but we've been practicing being anxious for so long that
We're good at it.
we're good at it.
And also understand what this is saying about us. That and I have the same kind of Stanford students, and it's remarkable how accomplished and delightful they are, but they don't have a basic trust in themselves or a benign world. But when I say to myself, if I don't motivate myself with harshness, I'm saying I really don't feel good enough to trust myself. And that I need the reward of the grade or the accomplishment to try to soothe that bad feeling I have about myself. I think what we're both trying to nudge people towards is, Mark uses the word kindness, to feel good about yourself and recognize that from that place, you'll want to be accomplished, you'll want to be in relationship, you'll want to help people, that it doesn't have to come just from fear and anxiety.
Well, this question is right along in the same vein. In trying to cultivate more loving kindness to myself, what phrases and words would you suggest I say and think to myself? So we've got 2 words, thank you. What else? Anything? And maybe that's enough.
Well, part of it can be to find your own words, rather than having something that you kind of go back to that might be useful, but kind of living the question, like at this moment, what would be something nice to say to myself, to connect, some way to connect with myself. So, finding your way and your own words, I think, is really important.
Great. Yeah. Here's one. I would say I feel so stressed, mostly from work pressures, that even the idea of carving out time in my day for meditation and reflection causes me anxiety. So what would your number 1 tip be?
Look at even how quickly you said that statement. It's like,
It was not my question. And this person goes on to say, what would maybe be the number 1 tip in getting started to reclaim a less stress-free life?
Well, Jon Kabat-Zinn, who started the mindfulness-based stress reduction programs throughout the world, used to say that it's very stressful to start practicing stress reduction. So I think that's a perfect question. And at first it seemed like, so we're in the middle of Silicon Valley and Stanford, and we have people, taking the mindfulness program here. And their big issue is time pressure. So we say, okay, we want you to meditate 30 to 45 minutes a day. And so it's very stressful. How do you fit that into your life? The thing that particularly the people who really practice it and really experiment with it, investigate it, they find that it actually gives you back more time. It kind of makes your life more efficient. And if you can see it that way, it's kind of Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's like if you look at the one thing that's really important and give your attention there, that a lot of the stuff that you've been doing that just kind of fill your time fall away anyway. So what mindfulness does, it actually makes your life more efficient. And in the end, it actually gives you back more time. So you invest some time in this, and at first there's kind of an inverse curve. It's work, it's hard, it's stressful. And then as you get into the flow of it, it gives you back. And that's the part that you should understand to help initiate the practice, is the wisdom of it.
Makes sense when you talked about it opening the creativity too.
Yes.
Well, what I would, in terms of the practice, I would suggest for any of you is to try to just calm your breathing down by relaxing your belly. Because the way our physiology is designed, somewhere in our lower abdomen, different parts of our nervous system are in better communication. And in a metaphorical sense, it's better or easier to battle the tension in your belly than it is to battle the whole world. And so if you can shift even for a moment to slower, quieter breathing, with your attention about an inch below your navel, that's the most direct pathway to quieting yourself down. It takes, in a trained person, it can take 5 seconds because there is some time lag that the arousal, the sympathetic part, has to stay in ascendance to make sure it's all clear. In a trained person, it can take 5 or 6 seconds. In an untrained person, it can take 10 or 15 seconds. But if you if you're asking for one thing when you're crazy, is just to bring your attention here, focus it as best you can on slowing and deepening your breathing. That's probably the most direct and simple practice.
Great.
And let me add one thing to that. One recommendation, and do this kind of as an experiment, in our busy, active lives, you don't have to do any more or less, but just have a little bit of your attention aware of your breathing all day long. A little teeny bit, like it can be 1% of your attention's directed towards feeling your breathing. And do it as an experiment, because this will change your life. It automatically, naturally brings you into more in the present moment, and it brings you awareness and settles you down. So you don't have to do anything different, it doesn't take any extra time, but have a little bit of attention to dedicate yourself to just notice that you're breathing.
Great.
All day long.
We'll stay with you just for a second to get your closing comments. What should we walk away, Dr. Abramson, knowing or doing as a result of your talk with us today?
Well, I think it comes down to claiming your birthright to be kind to yourself and to give yourself good, loving attention and caring for yourself. And the natural thing about that is the confusion of selfish and selfishness. As you take care of yourself in this way, it naturally radiates out. Naturally, you're kinder to other people. You couldn't think of causing somebody harm when you're kind to yourself. So it's not just for your own good, it's very altruistic to do this.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Luskin, we'll end with you in your closing comments.
Well, I just want to quickly remind that there was a study on gratitude that showed just listing 5 things that you loved once a week gave people more time to go to the gym and exercise, responding to what Mark said. Did you want me to read this?
I would love you to.
And I'm going to finish with a poem by Mary Oliver, which is about this beautiful world. And at some level, being able to let some of this stuff go to touch it. It's called a settlement. Look, it's spring, and last year's loose dust has turned into this soft willingness. The windflowers have come up trembling. Slowly the brackens are uplifting their curvaceous and pale bodies. The thrushes have come home, none less than filled with mystery, sorrow, happiness, music, ambition. And I am walking out into all of this with nowhere to go and no task undertaken, but to turn the pages of this beautiful world over and over in the world of my mind. Therefore, dark past, I'm about to do it. I'm about to forgive you for everything.
Wow. Thank you so much to Dr. Luskin and also Dr. Abramson, and thanks to our corporate partners for their contribution to the community and for this webcast. Corporate Partners employees have direct access to Stanford Health Navigators who are dedicated to serving your individual healthcare needs. They'll help you identify and connect to the appropriate healthcare resources regardless of your location or your insurance plan. You can contact your personal Stanford Health Navigator on the number that you see right there on your screen. I'm Mary Windishar, and on behalf of Dr. Luskin, Dr. Abramson, and our team here at Stanford, thank you for joining us.